In the fantasy world, dungeons are first introduced to be labyrinths filled with monsters and loot that adventurers explore as a way to get rich quickly. However, due to the hubris of most of them, they end up underestimating the truly difficult levels where nobody should even dare to enter due to its dangers. As this information is narrated, a group of said adventurers venture into a dungeon cautiously. Meanwhile, somewhere else, someone watches them from a crystal ball. It turns out to be a young man with his two female companions, and as one of the women asks him what they should do, he orders with a wicked smile to kick them out. At this, the panel zooms out and reveals them to be comfortably surrounded by countless dangerous monsters waiting for his command. The narration finally reveals him to also be the protagonist of the story, a formerly exiled alchemist who has become the world's most powerful dungeon master. But before we continue further, let us rewind to the very beginning and see how he became that way in the first place. In the royal capital of Alraj, news spreads throughout the people that the hero Alan and his party have successfully conquered the infamous Ouroboros dungeon, which is said to be impossible to conquer. Although they sing praises for the great hero, they do note that his party is not perfect. It then cuts to another building in the town, wherein the protagonist is giggling to himself with excitement as he mixes up a potion in a large cauldron. He is introduced as Rick Elord, an alchemist who is clearly passionate about his craft. In that world, alchemists are mainly seen working in support roles, using items they have created in alchemy to support the adventuring parties they are in. As he finishes making his current potion, he is suddenly visited by Alan, the famous hero of their land. Not only is the hero known to be an unrivaled swordmaster, but he is also a conqueror of countless dungeons, which earns him great support from the people of their nation. At his arrival, Rick tries to take the chance and show Alan the latest potion he has made, though the latter dismisses his enthusiasm and stoically informs that he has something important to tell him first. None the wiser, Rick anticipates his words with a carefree smile, though it quickly turns into a shocked and confused expression when Alan bluntly tells the former that he is officially being expelled from the party. Taken aback, Rick asks if he is joking, to which he continues to reveal that it was a unanimous decision made by the rest of the party. Even more shocked and ashamed, Rick asks for the reason why, to which Alan simply states that he has found a better alchemist than him. At that exact moment, the new alchemist replacement mentioned appears at the doorway. With a smug look on her face, she introduces herself as Dorma Gregane, and even claims to be an old acquaintance of Rick, though acknowledges that he would probably not remember her. Bro really said friendship ended with Rick. This random alchemist is my new best friend. And just like that, Alan proceeds to immediately kick him out of the party's house, telling him that Dorma will be using his room from that day onward. Even as Alan continues to talk down toward him with a cold expression, Rick still believes his expulsion to be too sudden, reminding Alan that they have been together since the start of their adventures. However, Alan does not feel the same way at all. He has no sense of camaraderie with the alchemist, going so far as to berate him for being nothing more than an idiotic burden on the party. With a menacing glare, Alan firmly states that Rick is not suitable to be part of the great hero's party. Even so, Rick asks them to accept one last potion of his, citing that it will add new and improved effects to the golden potions. However, Dorma ends up adding insult to injury, as she points out how even she can make such a potion and that his skills are actually completely inferior to her own. Rightfully offended by her blunt insult, Rick resentfully pushes the potion out of her hand and runs out of the room with his head down, gritting his teeth. While Dorma stays smug about her promotion and condescendingly shows some pity toward Rick's expulsion, Alan stays cold and stern, telling her to get ready for the next dungeon quest, as he does not care for incompetence, even going so far as to claim Rick is not worthy of being the companion of a hero. At this, even Dorma feels uneasy by how truly cutthroat Alan is, though keeps her cool and promises to not disappoint the latter. Later, Rick ends up in the forest, carrying what he can salvage of his belongings on his back, and is still clearly affected by his sudden expulsion from the party. He starts to feel resentful though, thinking back to how he has saved Alan countless times with his home-brewed potions. Nonetheless, he decides to move on quickly and thinks of a new life plan to earn his own living. Just as he is wrapped up in his thoughts, he suddenly comes across an unconscious, beautiful young woman on the ground, catching him off guard. At that exact moment, the woman wakes up groggily and begs him to help her. Snapping out of it, he proceeds to react and frantically asks if she is all right, though at that point he also notices that she has a pair of wings on her back, signifying that she is some sort of magical spirit. Although struggling to speak, the woman manages to reveal to him that she is a dungeon spirit named Yuri and begs him to help her once again. At this, Rick recalls that dungeon spirits are beings who gain their life energy from monsters and adventurers in their designated dungeons, though he has never once seen one in person and is surprised at their true appearance up close. As he tries to figure out how to help Yuri, she proceeds to reveal that he needs to make a contract with her in order for her to live, confusing him. Unfortunately for them, before he is able to process what she is asking of him, a werewolf monster appears its eyes on them as its new targets. Rick is also taken aback by this as he recalls that such a powerful monster should not be roaming around in that specific area of the forest, but he is unable to figure out the mystery behind its sudden appearance as it already attempts to attack them. Luckily, he manages to dodge out of the way with Yuri in his arms, though he knows he has no chance of defeating it all by himself as an alchemist. As Yuri continues to gasp for air helplessly in his arms, he decides to take his chances and agrees to make a contract with her even though he still does not understand the situation. The only condition he has is for her to run away and save her own life as he acts as a distraction. However, instead of running away, Yuri reveals herself to be fully healed once the contract is completed at his verbal confirmation, surprising him further. Before he can even react properly, she proceeds to summon a huge black hole which engulfs both the werewolf and him whole. He then finds himself feeling as if he is falling back into darkness. A moment later, he lands gently in a dark but empty dungeon, confusing him even more. As he is taken aback by his surroundings, Yuri reappears behind him and happily states that the dungeon is complete. Instinctively, he checks in on her well-being, to which she cheerfully assures him that she is all right and thanks him for making a contract with her, even referring to him as master. Rick is relieved at this, though the calm moment is short-lived as the werewolf also reappears behind them and roars aloud, revealing that it traveled through the black hole along with them. Before he can figure out his own plan of action, Yuri hands him the dungeon catalog and instructs him to create a monster since he can control the dungeon in any way he wants since he is the dungeon master. Deciding to trust her words, he proceeds to summon 5 monster eggs, which immediately hatch into goblins who defend him and Yuri against the werewolf. Outnumbered, the werewolf is soon defeated by the summoned goblins, guaranteeing the pair's safety for the time being. At this, Yuri explains to Rick that she has actually been looking for a dungeon master for the past 9 years, and that she was on the brink of death earlier since dungeon spirits will naturally pass away if they are unable to find a contracted master within 10 years. As she sadly calls herself a failure, she proceeds to show genuine gratitude to Rick, who accepted her contract offer. This part of her reminds Rick of himself as he was also deemed a failure by his peers, so he finds himself relating heavily. Deciding to stick with her due to their similar pitiful circumstances, he gives her a warm smile and promises to do his best to make a great dungeon as her master. Excitedly, she hugs him and also swears to stay obedient and by his side for the rest of his life so that he will never lose to an adventurer. Rick is taken aback by the last part of her words, to which she points out that as a dungeon master, he is the one controlling the contents of a dungeon. So of course, he will have to defend his territory by preparing it to fend off any adventurer or monster that enters it. At this, it finally dawns upon Rick that he is basically an enemy of humanity, as the tables have turned and he is now the one protecting and running the dungeon rather than entering and conquering them. After Rick is hit with the revelation of his new job, he gets to work quickly and sets up a lab in his new home, with Yuri and the already summoned goblins as his makeshift assistants. He instructs Yuri to bring him a boiling pot as well as some other tools and ingredients, which incites her curiosity, though he does not reveal his plans to her just yet. Let him cook. Rewinding back to when he was just told he is now in charge of running a dungeon, Rick finds himself momentarily distracted by Yuri's beauty, though quickly snaps himself back into reality and more exposition is revealed regarding how dungeons work exactly. Bombastic side-eye. It turns out that he is able to make monsters and traps to protect the dungeon by using a currency called dungeon points. Though when he sees how he can even make other miscellaneous adventuring items, he temporarily gets carried away and daydreams of building his own private atelier. Once he is brought back into reality by Yuri, it is also explained that he is able to earn back dungeon points when the dungeon successfully manages to absorb life energy from the defeated invading monsters and adventurers. Eventually, the stronger the dungeon becomes, the more treasures it will generate within it, and the higher the life energy it exudes, which the former attracts more adventurers and the latter attracts more monsters. Hence, he must first invest in strengthening the dungeon before he can spend any additional dungeon points for his own hobbies and interests, disappointing him slightly that he is unable to immediately utilize the environment, which is perfect for alchemy. Yuri goes on to lecture him that the top priority for a dungeon master is defense, though the monsters he has summoned are all the weakest rank G. At this, Rick questions if the rank of the monsters summoned is totally random, to which she explains it is purely based on luck and probability. Seeing how Rick does not have much luck in rolling for higher-ranked monsters, Yuri asks if he can use himself as a defense guard first, though the idea is immediately shut down when he points out how he does not look strong at all. As he tries to figure out an alternative solution to strengthening their defenses, he looks through the dungeon catalog and gets an idea when he lands on a page, prompting him to order Yuri to prepare some things for him. Meanwhile, back in Al Raj, the hero's party is having a meeting together, though Alan himself looks like he is in quite an irritated mood. Although the tank of the party, Victor Goldsmith, tries to cheer up and emphatically states that everyone is prone to making mistakes from time to time, Alan stays angry as it turns out that they have failed their latest dungeon quest. He proceeds to call out some of his party members for said mistakes made during the quest earlier, such as the mage Matilda for using the wrong kind of magic against the enemy and martial artist Fitz for not listening to his command during combat. Last but not least, he expresses his disappointment and anger with Dorma, the replacement alchemist, berating her lack of skills needed for the job scope. As she is unable to say anything to defend herself, Alan ends up blowing a fuse as he points out how he thought their party would have been perfect once he got rid of Rick the Incompetence. At this, all Dorma can do is apologize profusely, to which Victor steps in again and tells Alan to stop, trying to give the new alchemist some slack since she is still a new member. His temper does not cease though, as he simply gives one last death glare to the party and excuses himself, coldly telling them to rest. Something tells me that Rick was not the only weak link of the party after all. Once Alan is gone, the party acknowledges that they did do horribly since they have been a bit too relaxed ever since they got rid of Rick, who Fix refers to as the trash. One last member of the party is revealed, is the healer Mary, though she seems to be hesitant in bad-mouthing Rick. Nonetheless, Fitz quickly tries to move on and change the topic, suggesting that they eat something to take their mind off their failure and Alan's bad mood. Elsewhere, a still angered Alan punches the wall in rage as he insists to himself that there was nothing wrong with their strategy, yet they failed to clear a mere S-rank dungeon. He takes the failure especially hard, as he expects himself to be able to clear even SS-rank dungeons, especially as the hero. He concludes that his party is fully to blame for holding him back and lets himself vent out his rage onto nearby objects, though he soon calms down when a notable thought crosses his mind. With a strange grin, he convinces himself that it is simply bad luck, as he could have cleared the dungeon by himself with a certain thing activated. Back in the dungeon, Rick reveals that he plans to try using an alchemy technique called monster synthesis, though he is not experienced in it since he specializes in a different alchemic field. According to the theory he read in a book once, the process should be able to upgrade a G-rank monster to a D rank, improving it even by just a few small ranks. Fueled with confidence and intrigue, he proceeds to start monster synthesis, though it proves to be quite a brutal process. To both his and Yuri's surprise, he ends up upgrading the G-rank Goblin into an A-rank Cyclops, which is a much larger improvement than he expected. Fortunately, it retains its utmost obedience toward Rick as its master, though they are still shocked at the sudden favor in their odds. In fact, Yuri reveals that it is quite rare to get an A-rank monster just from their normal summons, citing that the drop rate is less than 2%. POV. The gacha addict finally wins his 50-50 pity. Amidst their confusion with this miraculous turnabout, Yuri suddenly senses that there is an intruder in their dungeon, and through a crystal ball that acts as a security camera in there, they find that the intruder is a lone adventurer. Analyzing the latter's equipment, Rick notes that the adventurer should be either in rank C or B, so he would have easily conquered the G-rank dungeon in a normal scenario. But with their miracle of a Cyclops, Yuri anticipates that the adventurer will not even stand a chance, even if he was with a party of 10 members. With that, Yuri tells Rick to quickly give his orders to the Cyclops to protect their dungeon, and though he momentarily hesitates as he realizes he will be terminating the lives of actual people in this new job, he pushes this feeling away when Yuri questions him and orders the Cyclops to intercept the adventurer. As expected, the adventurer did not expect the Cyclops' appearance at all at such a low-ranked dungeon. Before he can even react, the Cyclops takes him down, successfully earning Rick and Yuri a great amount of dungeon points. While Yuri happily celebrates their victory, the uneasy feeling within Rick does not go away just yet. Nonetheless, he cannot help but admit to himself that he does not feel any remorse at all for ordering the elimination of a human being. Soon after, Rick tries his luck at summoning 5 new monsters, but much like the first result, they all turn out to be weak G-rank monsters once again. He laments how he has terrible luck, though Yuri quickly tries to cheer him up and remind him that they can simply use monster synthesis again to upgrade them quickly. At this, Rick reminds her that the last outcome of monster synthesis was simply a miracle, and that he does not expect to make a monster like the Cyclops once again. However, he is soon proven wrong when they end up synthesizing another A-rank monster like the Behemoth. As he is completely shocked by this, Yuri concludes that monster synthesis must actually be his special skill in life, as she points out how monsters typically can only be upgraded 3 ranks higher via the synthesis technique. She firmly believes that Rick himself has the ability to make such monsters exceed the limit. Although still shocked and skeptical at the discovery of this newfound skill of his, he is encouraged by Yuri's supportive and enthusiastic words, going so far as to claim that it is his destiny to be a dungeon master. Feeling motivated by her, he decides to work on the next synthesis right away. However, he suddenly pauses as a memory resurfaces in his mind. He recalls that he once had to face a behemoth as an adventurer in the past, and this leads to a brief flashback of the event. Back then, Alan is in the middle of holding off the behemoth as Rick is rushing the creation of a golden potion. Just in the nick of time, he manages to finish it and throws it over to Alan, who gulps it all down in one go and instantly strikes the monster down with the boosted strength. At this, the party surrounds him excitedly and showers him with praises, and though Alan acts cool about it, he noticeably gives a strange, sideways glance toward a happy Rick and huffs sarcastically. A while after that, Rick is seen rushing over to the meeting room and apologizing for being late, then puts down a heavy tray full of potions he has been making for the rest of the party. There seem to be a variety of options with different uses and effects, though Alan immediately shuts his passion down and calls them useless. With a cold look, he reminds Rick that his only role in the party is to supply them with golden potions, and outside of that, he is useless to them. Although Victor tries to stop Alan from sounding harsh, the latter dismisses the former and goes on to point out bluntly that their party does not need to rely on any other options since they are all strong enough to hold their own ground. In addition to that, they have gained both a healer and a mage for support recently, which seemed to have been both Rick's job scope in the beginning. But with them around and specializing in such skills in the present, Rick has proven to be useless in Alan's eyes. Back in the present, as he is explaining his downfall in the party to Yuri, she points out that he could have helped in other, more passive but still useful ways, like staying back from active missions and focusing more on increasing inventory, which he explains that being part of an adventurer's party requires a lot of on-the-spot activity, so it would not work out. With that, he changes the topic and goes back to discussing further dungeon management, such as implementing communication paper and warp platforms for them to teleport between floors in a dungeon. Soon enough, a yawn escapes his lips, and he asks if he can go to sleep since there are no more signs of any adventurers entering, to which Yuri promises to keep watch over the dungeon while he does so, since dungeon spirits do not need sleep. Before he leaves, though, he questions if he can at least create a pillow for him to rest on with dungeon points, to which Yuri suggests that he can simply use her lap to rest on. Flustered, he initially tries to reject her offer, though when she insists, he ends up relenting, though is too nervous to fall asleep. Bro is finally experiencing his first touch with a woman. Let's congratulate him. Sometime later, Rick suddenly calls out to Yuri and admits to her that he did not feel any genuine guilt when he committed his first elimination of human life via the adventurer. At this, Yuri reveals that his lack of remorse is most likely because of his contract with her, as dungeon spirits personally do not feel remorse toward the loss of people's lives in dungeons since they see it as nothing more than the cycle of life. As the contract essentially also binds the master with the spirit, that is probably what affected him into feeling the same way. At this revelation, he frantically questions if he is no longer human by proxy as well. At this, Yuri reassures him that he is right where he belongs, as the true master of the dungeon, and envelops him in a warm embrace. Convinced by her words, Rick decides to finally accept his new fate and falls asleep in her lap. Back at the house of the hero's party, the healer Mary holds a sad expression as she wishes for Rick to help her. And this is how this segment of the manga ends. Unfortunately, there aren't enough chapters to continue, but we declare to do so as soon as more chapters are released. So if you're looking forward to another fascinating tale, check our best recommendation here.